I'm Frankie, and I just wanted to make a video for you talking a little bit more about the kernel. I see some real resistance to some of the texts that we're reading because they're dark, because they're hard. And the first thing I want to say about that is that literature teaches us how to be human. It offers other ideas. We don't read happy celebrational stories much because honestly, we don't need help with that. When we're happy, we know how to be happy. We know how to rejoice. We know how to um, uh, celebrates. But other things that are more complex, like Story of an Hour, how she's rejoicing because her husband died. That's not socially acceptable now. That certainly wouldn't have been socially acceptable in her time. And think about Kate Chopin, who wrote that. She didn't even have equal rights. And here she was writing a story about this radical feeling, this subtle, complex feeling that this woman had. And so I'd like you to read these with a really open mind. There's a couple of terms I want to share with you. One of them is called, well, it's a value system, and being aware of your own value system and things that you reject because they don't suit your value system outright. Can really get in the way of your understanding fully a text. So being aware, for example, I once was in a writing group, and a man had written a story about his sister, his real sister, who'd been murdered. And he'd written it as a fictional story, even though it was based on truth. And he was in the backseat of a car staring at this little baby cloth that he knew his sister had touched. And they were driving to her funeral. Someone else, the husband, the widowed husband, was driving. And he was staring at this baby cloth and really thinking about loss. And in that writing group, one of the people said, no man would ever notice a baby cloth in the back of a station wagon. And it was such an ironic moment because she knew that this was from his point of view, from his real life, and yet she still was telling him that men don't notice a baby cloth, which is really her value system and her limited view of what men do and do not notice. Um, and that is just a perfect example for me of how we'll be blind to other things because we're so addicted to our own value system or entrenched in. And one of the reasons we go to college is to be changed, is to have our minds opened and changed and learn new things and think about things more critically. It is our way naturally to be like, oh, I don't want to hear about that and turn away. But as students of literature, it's our job to be open to it, to really to look at it more deeply. There's another term called cognitive dissonance, which is when you expect something of a reading and then it's different and then you reject it because you're like, that's not what I was expecting. And that can be a really dangerous place for you as a reader because you're missing out on a chance to learn and a chance to grow. Um, so I suggest if you feel those feelings, instead of just rejecting them, instead think, why do I feel that way? What is it about this that is freaking me out so much? I mean, I'm so interested in the kernel because I don't watch TV, but I'm aware of the news and I check in through the radio. And I mean, with ISIS and what's going on there are beheadings in Mexico. This story about the colonel in El Salvador from the 70s, this is not a new story. This is something we need to know about humankind, right? Humankind is capable of deep savagery for political beliefs. It's important as educated people to be aware of that. That's a danger in our world. It's always been a danger in our world, and it's important for us to be aware of that. So some other things I wanted to talk about the kernel are the beauty of the metaphorical language in here, right? There's things this is a tightly woven piece. The the way that the kneecaps can be cut from the man's knees and the hands cut to lace. That's a purely domestic metaphor. So Forche stays inside the house in a way. She pulls her metaphors from inside the house. Lace. They're not just cut to shreds. They're cut to lace, which is something, that might be on a tablecloth. So it keeps us inside this dining room in a way. There's some other things. The moon is hanging from, let me find the exact line there. The moon swung bare on its black cord over the house. That is a metaphor of torture, right? A bare bulb swinging from the ceiling above. So these images of domesticity and torture and violence are tightly woven throughout this story. There's a pistol and a cushion. There's lamb and the gold bell, and there's a grocery bag full of ears. So that's craft, and that's the kind of thing. If you feel freaked out about a piece, then look at the craft. How is it written? Because the fact that you're freaked out is miraculous. There are 26 letters in the alphabet, and somehow a woman in the 70s wrote a piece that is still so alarming and disturbing that we want to turn away from it all these years later. It is a powerful, powerful thing. This is the deeper thing that I would like you to be aware of, is that just through using these tools, these words, these ways that the words are put together, an author can create a whole world inside us, total strangers, people who only have in common perhaps the language, the English language that we're reading it in. And yet somehow we can be transported to this room and see this terrible bag of ears thrown on the table. That's powerful stuff. That is actually what revolutions, do you know at the beginning of revolutions, the first people killed are always the artists and the poets and the writers, because they are the ones who can speak most powerfully to the masses and raise them up in revolution. So what we're studying is not irrelevant in any way to our own lives, to our political lives, to the various cultures we are from. This stuff is powerful. It really, really, it can drive so much in the world. It does drive so much in the world. The reason we vote for who we vote for in the political elections is because of the words they use to convince us, right? So, some other things about Fourchet, I really think it's important to think about these last lines. He swept the ears to the floor with his arm and held the last of his wine in the air. Something for your poetry. No, he said. Some of the ears on the floor caught this scrap of his voice. Some of the ears on the floor were pressed to the ground. So, first of all, that's personification. These ears are dead. They cannot hear. So that's a metaphorical use of this term. Personification is a kind of metaphor. And some of the ears on the floor caught the scrap of his voice. It's like the people who he probably killed for these ears are still listening. Their ghosts are there, are listening. Some of the ears on the floor were pressed to the ground. I don't know if you know this term of back in the old days, Native Americans would press their ears to the ground to see what was coming. And so there's this idea that something is coming to the colonel, some change. Obviously he rules with an iron fist, right? He uses torture devices. He's very afraid. His household is, armed to the teeth. So what is coming? Perhaps his comeuppance is coming. Perhaps that's the idea here. And so just some fodder for thought, a little bit deeper. So there's just so much going on in that one piece, right? It's one section of text, and it's disgusting and horrifying and uses so many literary tools and is alluding to El Salvador, this whole political historical movement that happened. And I love Giovanni did that beautiful research on it. If you can, feel free to always do that kind of thing. Just if you borrow ideas from another source, then you need to cite it. But it is scholarly to go and see what other people say about these authors or these poems. So please feel free to do that. That's called contextualization. So I guess that's all I have to say to you this Friday morning. And you're doing a great job, working hard, working together. I love the way you're giving each other feedback and you're so respectful. I'm working on your essays, your evaluation drafts. And stay in touch with me like you have been. Ask me questions. If I forget to grade something, let me know. Sometimes it happens. I usually read it, but I forget to grade it because to me the more important part is the thinking that you've done. So, all right, have a great weekend.